Husband's been secretly working on a second house in another town to hide his affair, and it sounds like something you'd read on a message board at 2 in the morning with a bowl of cereal you didn't plan to eat, but here I am saying it out loud to you, because if I don't tell someone my chest is going to rattle itself loose. I'm Mara, I'm 35, I teach 8th grade science. Yes, the frog unit. No, I don't make them dissect anymore, we do VR now. And I found out because of a paint chip in the pocket of a hoodie I've washed 100 times without ever noticing the world hiding inside it. It was the light that made me suspicious first, isn't that weird? Not a lipstick stain, not a perfume, just that new kind of tired that collects behind a person's eyes like stormwater. Tom would come home on Thursdays smelling like lumber and citrus cleaner, and I kept thinking someone at the marketing firm had discovered a new authentic masculinity soap and was force testing it on employees. He said late pitches, demanding client, the market. He always says the market like it's a cranky uncle who needs to nap. I believed him because believing is easier than re-architecting your whole life on a Tuesday. On the day everything tilted, I was rescuing a hoodie from the dryer before it shrank into a toddler's costume. His hoodie. Navy, soft, a little threadbare at the cuffs. I jammed my hands into the kangaroo pocket, found a folded receipt and a flake of dried paint, dusty green, the exact shade of envy if envy were trying to be a wall. The receipt wasn't from a bar or a restaurant. It was from a discount hardware store 2 towns east, a place we've never had reason to wander into. 2 towns east is a stretch of half-finished subdivisions and a diner with a sign that says PIE like it's a proclamation. The receipt had a list of things that didn't belong to our life: 12 sheets of drywall, 5 gallons of sea glass paint, a roll of underlayment, outlet covers, a bundle of cedar planks, and this is what made my stomach drop, a set of brass house numbers. I teach kids how to look for patterns, and once your brain hears that instruction in your own voice, it applies it with horrific enthusiasm. The next pattern arrived as a text ding while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, I swear. The phone lit up on the counter with a preview you could read from across the room. Don't forget the key under the planter, it said, like a lullaby for liars. The contact was saved under a first name I didn't know, a normal one like Erin or Kate, common enough to vanish in conversation. The ... bubble pulsed like a trapped heart. Then another message: the blue door looks amazing. You pick the perfect blue. Blue door. Sea glass walls. Brass numbers. A house is being assembled in my marriage and it doesn't have my fingerprints on it. I told myself I'd wait. Ask him at dinner, calmly, with the big salad bowl between us acting as Switzerland. But he came out of the shower humming with the water still in his ears, kissed my head, said he had to swing by the client for a document he forgot. He put on the hoodie. My hands still smelled like dryer sheets when I decided. I grabbed my keys, told the dog I'd be back, and followed the map app to the paint. The drive east was a string of familiar things made unfamiliar. The school bus squeal at the corner where I wave at Mrs. Alvarez, the gas station where the owner keeps a bowl of dog treats on the counter, the billboard with a dentist smiling like he knows a secret. Then the town line, then the diner, then rows of new houses that look like they were stamped out by a giant pastry cutter. I turned onto a cul-de-sac so fresh the road paint looked like it was still drying. Everything smelled like ambition and pine. You've never appreciated your nervous system until you pull to the curb of a story you don't want to be in. The houses wore their identical faces, white siding, dark shutters, tidy porches, except one of them did have a blue door, and not just any blue either, the kind of blue that says someone stood too long in the aisle with their palms open, negotiating with grief and hope, and the one paint chip that held both. Brass numbers beside it, still shiny. A planter half tucked under the single step, I swear to you, like a prop in a play that forgot to be subtle. I parked around the corner and walked with the wobble of a person who forgot their feet. My heart went hello against my ribs a little too brightly. I rehearsed a dozen scripts and hated every one. Knock and faint. Knock and lie. Knock and burn it all down in a sentence. The door opened before my knuckles reached it. She was younger than me by 5 years, maybe 8, but not by a lifetime. Her hair was in a messy bun that didn't look labored. She wore paint on her forearm like a bracelet. The first thing I thought was, she looks kind. The second was, I want to smash the planter. Can I help you? She said, voice light, the good receptionist of a life that isn't mine. The room behind her smelled like fresh cut wood and coffee. Hi, I said, because somehow I am the one with manners. I'm looking for Tom. For the record, this is the moment I expected the whole story to buckle. I expected who or wrong house or at least a startled drop of the mouth. She didn't flinch. Her eyes flicked past me the way people check for a car before crossing. He just ran to the hardware store, she said. He'll be right back. And then the strangest kindness. Do you want to come in and sit? It's cold out. She opened the door wider, and I stepped into my own bad dream with my shoes still on because somewhere my grandmother's ghost was nodding. If you're picturing a lair, you'd be disappointed. It was a house. Half there, taped seams, taped hopes. A living room in bones, a kitchen island still wearing its cardboard coat, the big blue door like a joke from the universe leaning on the wrong wall. There were 2 coffee mugs on the floor acting as coasters for themselves. One said, "World's Okayest Gardener." The other had a chipped rim. A playlist hummed from a speaker, piano covers of pop songs. The whole place had that brave, flimsy joy of a campsite. "I'm Mara," I told her. Because names are anchors. And I couldn't finish the word. Wife is a heavy syllable when you drop it. Partner is a word you use when you don't need to compare rings. "We're married," I said finally, like a person reading a sign out loud to convince herself it exists. She put her hand to her mouth the way kids do when they break something while being careful. She didn't step back. She didn't step forward. "I'm Elle," she said. I thought, and she stopped like I had before the cliff of the next word. The sound of tires on gravel scratched the silence. A car door hurried. Boots. Then Tom, carrying a bundle of trim, stepping into the doorway like a hero in the wrong movie. He saw me and did the face you could teach in acting class. Surprise, calculation, the speed through of 1,000 justifications, then the small collapse when none of them decide to be brave. He dropped the trim. A piece clapped against the floor in a way that felt like applause for a very bad show. "Mara," he said, my name like a tripwire. "How did?" "The hoodie," I said. "The paint. The receipt. The text." I was doing that thing I do with the kids where I lay out their lab materials and point, not to shame them but to keep them from pretending we're missing a beaker. His mouth opened and closed, and for a stupid second I worried about the fish we hadn't fed yet, and then remembered we don't own fish. "I was going to tell you," he said, and I laughed, the kind of laugh that leaks at the edges and ruins everyone's shoes. Elle, to her credit, didn't vanish behind the fridge. She stood there, a person who had chosen a door color, who had probably stood in a store with Tom holding a chip up to his eyes and saying, "This one," and believing she was choosing more than paint. "I didn't know," she said, quickly, quietly. "He told me you were separated. He said it was complicated and temporary and he would handle it." She looked at him, and in that look I saw the sickening symmetry. He had gifted us both the same story, altered for audience, and we both received it because we wanted the world to make a little sense. There are 1,000 ways to detonate a life. I picked the one I could live with. I asked for a chair and she handed me an upturned bucket like we were fixing a sink. "I sat today." I told him to sit and he did, and the 3 of us made a triangle on a plywood floor that would someday get covered in cherry or oak, but not by us. I asked questions like I write them on worksheets. When did this start? How did you fund it? Why another town? What is wrong with the town we already pay taxes to? Where did you go while I thought you were arguing about fonts with a brand director named Kyle? He talked. Not in eloquent monologues, in scraps. A vendor event last spring where he and Elle both stood at tables selling things with logos and accidentally sold each other on this stupid fantasy. The thrill of building something from studs when his days were spent arranging ideas in the air. The house as a project, as proof, as a place that didn't require him to be the version of himself that sat at our dinner table and worried about the gas bill. "I told myself it was a workshop," he said. "I told myself I was making something we could." "What?" I cut in. "Move into with me while she keeps the blue door." My voice came out level in a way that felt earned. He looked at the brass numbers like they could do math for him. "I thought if I finished it, the decision would make itself," he said. "If you've ever wanted to slap a sentence, that was the one." Elle stood and went to the doorway of a room that would be a bedroom if dreams were zoning permits. She touched the frame the way people touch a sleeping child's cheek. "I can't be part of this," she said to him, not to me, and in that moment I realized she was going to step away, not because she is a villain redeeming herself, but because she had been living in a story based on a forged signature and the ink had finally run. I stood. The bucket rocked. "The thing about lying," I told him, teacher voice sliding out without invitation, "is it works until the first quiz." He flinched, and I wanted to feel triumphant, but all I felt was exhausted, like I'd been holding a door closed in a hurricane. He asked for a chance like they all do in the cautionary fables you hear over wine. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. The tears had been used up on a drive past a diner. "You built a house," I said. "You didn't trip into a kiss at an office party. You poured a foundation and framed walls and bought outlet covers. That's not an oops. That's a blueprint." My voice shook on blueprint. I studied it. "I'm not handing in extra credit for your course." I left them there with their piano covers and their unfinished floor and the door that couldn't decide if it was a symbol or just paint. Outside, the wind did that petty slap it does before rain. I got into my car and put both hands on the wheel and didn't turn the engine for a long full minute because I needed to count my breath to 5 and then again to 5 and then again until 5 felt like a place I could stand. Here are the boring parts that matter and never get told. I called my friend Priya, who is both a divorce lawyer and the gentlest person I know, a rare Pokemon of competence and grace. I did not call my mother first, because my mother would weaponize forgiveness until I was a ghost. Priya told me to photograph everything while it was still fresh. I went home and took pictures of the hoodie, the receipt, the text. I printed them for myself, not to post, because the internet is a fire that eats the cook. I moved money into an account with only my name on it like every article tells you to do before you think you need to do it. I texted Tom an address for a hotel and told him I'd pay for 2 nights so he could make a plan, and during those 2 nights I would change the Wi-Fi password, the door code, and the part of my brain that thought we were a team. He said that was cruel. I said boundaries always feel like walls when you've been walking through people. The next day at school I taught about ecosystems, how energy moves, how a change in one corner changes everything else. I looked at 23 faces trying to become people, and I decided that whatever I did next would not teach me to be smaller. A kid left a note on my desk that said, "You are the best Ms. M," with a drawing of me as a stick figure holding a beaker. I cried in the supply closet for 30 seconds because 30 is all the schedule allowed, and then I went back and we made non-Newtonian fluid and laughed when it gooped. At night, Tom texted paragraphs that began with "listen" and ended with "please." I read them all. I didn't reply. Reading is not a contract. On the 3rd day he sent a photo of the blue door closed with the numbers removed. "It's over," he wrote. The sentence clanged against my ribs like a dropped pan. I believed him about that and about nothing else. He wanted to meet. I said, "Daylight public place because you learn the safety rules and then you keep them." We sat at the cafe with the lemon tarts and too many plants, and he looked like a person who had finally noticed the hole in his own boat. He tried to explain a thing that doesn't have a satisfying shape, how he had wanted to feel competent and new, and how the house had offered him a version of himself with clean edges, while our life had become the messy, beautiful middle nobody wants to post. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time it didn't sound like a comma before a request. "Me too," I said, and I meant the loss of the life we were building, the way you mean it when you find a sweater you loved and realize the moths got there first. We talked about the mortgage and the dog and the things you cover while your heart vacates the premises. I told him I wanted the house, ours, the one with the crooked fence and the lemon tree that never fruits but tries, until we figured out if it was mine or if we were selling it to the next people who think they're different. He asked if there was a path back. I told him there might be paths in the world, but I wasn't walking any that started at a blue door he chose without me. It wasn't anger, though God I had enough of that to light the block. It was orientation. I was pointed toward a life where my mouth didn't twitch when someone said Thursday, where I wasn't a surprise guest at the unveiling of a secret project. A week later, I drove east one more time alone, not to haunt it but to confirm the coordinates of my own story. The door was primed back to a bland builder's white. The planter was gone. A for sale sign leaned flirtily on the lawn, as if the grass knew it had been in a soap opera and wanted a quieter role. I parked without turning the engine off and watched two robins kick at the mulch. Construction sounds rattled from a block away. The house looked empty the way a shell looks empty, echoing something I didn't want to hold anymore. I said goodbye because I am dramatic in small private ways, and the car ate the word like it was nothing, which I guess it was. Healing is boring and holy. It's taking the dog out when it rains. It's applying chapstick at stoplights. It's deciding that on Mondays you will make a big pot of stew and you will freeze half of it and you will feed your body even if your brain thinks chaos is a food group. It's texting your friend Layla who will come over with cheap wine and better advice, and you'll sit on the kitchen floor because chairs are for people who aren't in triage. It's sleeping on the diagonal because you can and then correcting yourself because the diagonal isn't comfortable, it's just performance. It's buying new sheets because even Cotton learns stories by heart. People keep asking me why I didn't scream at him more, why I didn't torch his career, why I didn't drive a nail through the blue door. I tell them I'm a science teacher, controlled burn, not wildfire. Flames are mesmerizing and then you're left with nothing to study but ash. I'm building a lab again, a life where the variables are named and the measurements are mine. Sometimes I still reach across the bed with my foot for his ankle in the night, because the body is a creature of both habit and hope. When I wake up, I put my foot back on my side and feel the sheet as proof that boundaries can also be soft. There's a new plant on my windowsill, a pothose named Beatrice because naming things makes them live longer in this apartment. Every morning I turn her toward the sun like I'm rotating a compass. She droops when I forget. She forgives quickly when I remember. Little science, pothose cuttings root in water, which is both metaphor and instruction. I have a mason jar on the counter with two vines already making promises with their white, eager tongues. Once a week I change the water. Once a week I murmur something encouraging to a plant because that's who I am now, a person who gives the smallest living things a reason to keep going. Do I miss him? Of course. Not just him, the idea of him that we auditioned for and sometimes got to play. Do I miss the version of myself who didn't know how to spot a pattern? I miss her ignorance like I miss college naps, which is to say, with a grin and a shrug. I like the woman who sat on a bucket and said no more than I like the woman who would have baked a cake and called it compromise. If you're here because your own hoodie coughed up a clue, I'm not going to tell you to burn your life or to save it. I'm going to tell you to breathe, to collect, to write down dates like you're the archivist of a museum you didn't want to open. I'm going to tell you to find your Priya, your Layla, your plant. I'm going to tell you that houses get built in secret all the time in cul-de-sacs and phones and hearts, and you are allowed to bulldoze what breaks you. You are also allowed to walk away and let the market work it out without you. The kids in my third period asked me last week why the sky is blue, and I gave them the Rayleigh scattering answer, and one of them said, "Oh, Ms. M, maybe it's just because blue is a nice color," and I laughed like clean laughter and said, "Sometimes that's the answer too." And then I thought of a door that's not my problem anymore. I biked home under a very loud sky and made tea and stood at my window like a person in an indie film who is about to make a series of practical decisions. I texted the dog walker to say I'd be home early. I watered Beatrice. I opened the spreadsheet where I keep track of small victories, slept 7 hours, learned a new name for a cloud, said no to something that would have stolen me and added another row, didn't drive east. Stayed put. Made dinner. Kept the lights on in the place I actually live. Husband's been secretly working on a second house in another town to hide his affair, and I thought that sentence would swallow me. It didn't. It turned out to be a door, no paint chip required, and on the other side of it was a life where I am not a secret in my own story. I'm just me, Mara, 35, science teacher, mildly allergic to cilantro, very good at eyeballing how much pasta a person needs, learning again every day that the only house I'm responsible for is the one with my name on the lease, my books on the floor, my plants turning toward a sun that doesn't ask me to apologize for wanting light.